Hey friends, you are listening to a very special episode of Life on Side B as we get the new and final season started. This is an episode we recorded with the hosts of the new Kinship podcast. Half of the episode is here and the other half is on their page. So go ahead, listen to this episode, and when you're done, go into the search box of wherever you listen to podcasts, type in New Kinship, and listen to the other half over there. There's going to be really good, interesting, important details about this upcoming season over there as well as here. So you'll want to listen to both parts. And with that, let's head into the episode.
Welcome to the first episode of the last season of Life on Side B. This is David Frank here with TJ Espinoza.
Hi, everyone.
Interviewing with some of the traditional hosts of Life on Side B. Welcome, Josh and Ashley.
Hello.
Hello. That was great. You did a great job. See? Look at that.
I've never welcomed people to Life on Side B before, so this is a fun little turn of affairs. TJ and I are from New Kinship Podcast, and we have the honor of doing a little swapperoo here, where half of our episode will be here on Life on Side B, where you're listening. And half of our episode will be on New Kinship Podcast.
Well, I know we've talked about, podcasting and stuff, and so it's really cool to finally be able to do something like this. And interviewing David and TJ, especially as our own podcast is coming to an end. Life on Side B is in its final season, and really wanted to be able to exemplify, like, hey, there's other people doing podcasting work. There's these Side B conversations that are going to continue happening, and it's not just us. And so that's why we wanted to do this crossover so that, people that might not know you could hear you, and hoping that, Life on Side B listeners will come to do that. So I'm really excited for this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And maybe we can also get some information that your listeners haven't heard yet about you guys.
So maybe.
You want to start first on just share with us, how did this podcast start? What is this tell us how this whole initiative began, because you also changed your name.
Yeah. TJ, I think
when you guys started, didn't you guys release 2 episodes and then disappear for months at a time?
Yeah.
That happens. I don't remember, but maybe.
It totally. We were like, oh, let's start the podcast, and then it was like, okay, let's maybe we should get the first 3 episodes done so we can release them in order. And then we're like, oh, but these first 2 are so good. Let's just get going. And then release the first 2. Big gap. And
yeah.
And then
we had to
eventually
get our team organized. Once we got our team organized, our podcast manager on, then we could get the production flowing. But it took a while.
Angels.
Y'all started so much more organized than us. Podcast manager. Production.
Right.
What? We don't even know these terms. Okay. Continue.
We've been blessed with a podcast manager and a sound audio engineer. Yeah. Who are our friends and are both straight. So pretty serious straight allies for Side B people. Yeah.
Wow.
I think
willing to listen to you on hours at a time, over and over again.
I know.
I hope they like our voices enough to make it work. I think it started a long time ago. I asked David Frank, I was like, hey, we have a lot of conversations on these topics. This is when we were kind of early in Side B movement, sort of. He and I both kind of entered Side B movement more generally in 2018 when the first Revoice conference happened. Because just a few, not maybe 6 months before or something, David Frank had sort of alluded to me that he wasn't straight in sort of ambiguous terms. And I was like, you mean you're gay or something?
So you guys knew each other before you?
Yeah, we were
knew
friends. We were
friends.
friends.
Oh, okay.
We've been friends, kind of shared friends for a while. And he's like, if you want to talk about that more, let me know. And I was like, nah.
Yeah, he didn't want to talk about it.
Oh my God.
But I kept pursuing it over time. And then we saw Revoice, the first Revoice happened. Through I think Spiritual Friendship. I was a Spiritual Friendship blog reader back when it was still, people posting. People were actually, it was
Writing.
being written. And so we heard about Revoice, and then we went to the first conference. Kind of a transformative experience that first time. And then from there, David Frank and I continued conversations. So maybe like, I don't know how many years ago we started, a couple of years, 2 or 3 years. Is that right? I don't remember.
And Life on Side B was definitely kind of an inspiration of like, oh, look what they're doing. And you guys had your live recording at one of the Revoices. Go sit in there and see what they're doing. And and then
Love
TJ
that.
brought up the
Didn't y'all
idea.
say it like y'all went and then at the end you're like, the podcast is great. The audio needs some work.
Y'all are not the first ones. We don't have a podcast manager.
Oh, sure.
Oh, and I had a friend who told me about Descript, the audio editing software he used. That's a godsend as well.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing.
But I was resistant to starting a
was.
podcast.
I was like, we have a lot of conversations. We should, start sharing this. And then I was trying to realize there was conversations in my communities that I wanted to have more of, particularly, that I didn't see being talked about in public inside B as much. So I was like, well, let's do this. And I was like, hey, David Frank, we talk. We should, move this forward. So he was resistant, as he said. And we recorded a few. And I think he wasn't sure if he would continue after the few. So he was like, yeah, this might have just been a thing that happened. And praise God for that small thing. And, we'll just move forward and it'll be fine. But then over time, we kept getting organized, got our team together. And we just kept making connections and pursuing topics of interest that we actually cared about a lot, especially me. I mean, I think a lot of the topics are my interests in particular.
Your inspiration. Yes.
Well, and I've definitely had, because we try to have a broad, our first name was Communion and Shalom, and so we're just thinking about all the different ways that Christian faith impacts different ways, and we're trying to think on just like where there's not nuanced conversations and kind of hot topics in some ways, like on ethnicity and race, but also just where my heart is with local community. And so we're hoping to have a more balanced podcast, but it's been like 85-90% side B stuff, side B adjacent, and there's been times where I've been like, I'm tired talking about sexuality, I need to go talk about economics.
Which he does, which is good. So no problem.
But then we'll
we
find
pretty
someone
intentionally did a more general mission for our podcast, just because we had more topics we wanted to talk about, but also there's a certain way by having more general mission, it shows that side B people themselves have a wider interest, have more things to talk about from our particular positionality as side B people. Like being side B impacts what we think about economics. It even I've experienced it impacting what I think about ethnicity in some ways as well. It might impact how we think about community, obviously community, how people can live out community and kinship. So all these things were sort of why we chose this more general style from our particular position. So,
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I really love that. Cause like when I mentioned before in the last episode over on Life Inside B is that like, we're more than just our sexuality. Like, and that might trigger some things for some of us because that's been used against us talking about gay, but it is true. We are. And we've known that, but being able to show to the world, I love that you guys are doing that. Like we can engage on more than just this topic.
And even I think being queer and being side B we have a different sensibility around some of these topics, and our sensibility is not heard enough. And our sensibility, I think, has prophetic possibilities for the church. And again, a lot of people discount us. They don't want to listen to us because we're too impure or whatever thing they don't like. But we're also in the church. We're here. Yeah, we have things to say. So,
I know we're interviewing you, but I was just talking to someone about this yesterday about how we're in a big polarized world. Just no one can deal with nuance right now. And I think that is a gift of side B people, like what you guys are doing, because we have to live in the nuance.
Jesus.
We can't be polarized. And so like we are able, maybe not always perfectly, but we are able to sit in it and weed through the polarization of so many topics. And it seems like that's what you guys are going through.
I was just talking to a side B friend that I met at Revoice, and it's like, oh yeah, the biggest gift of not being straight was that it kept me from falling into just like the simple Christian binaries. Because
Gay,
like
bad.
my life was messy,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I realized things were more complicated.
Amazing.
True.
Were there any episodes that were meaningful to your own growth and development?
I can definitely say the 3-part episode with Catherine Moak. The middle part is where she goes into this expansive history of Western romance, and just like 4 so different kind of stages and how it's developing throughout culture. And it was just so kind of eye-opening to see our culture, the way that we approach romance and marriage in this kind of intense couplings, fulfillment through marriage, and then how like in the past romance wasn't even always connected with marriage. People like it just helps you to see like how what's the right word, like how our culture didn't have to be the way that it is right now.
It's constructed. The marriage concept of marriage was socially constructed.
And so like because in the world and especially in our churches, we start to like theologically try to like bolster this specific cultural
constructions
postures
of
we have. And I just like it just gave me a way. It kind of helped me disassociate from some of those things and just hold them more loosely. That's still just it's led to a lot more questions because you're like, oh well, then how ought these things pair together? How does sex, romance, eros, how they do relate to each other, but not in the way that maybe they've been handed.
Not
to us.
necessarily in the way that they have been constructed. Yeah. Do you have another one, or should I say? Should I talk about my one? One that was notable for me was talking with my friend Wendia, who also has been on your podcast, and talking through being queer in Africa. Because I've lived since my youth on the continent of Africa, and just processing some of that. And that was kind of healing in a certain way. We've had some similar life experiences just from youth on the continent and queer Africa, etc. Also, I think telling my story in full was sort of important because I hadn't talked about it in full in the public sphere. And then the final one for me, we've engaged a lot of side A people in our early times. And that was important for me just to have those conversations in public. And often with people who are like they're actually good, they're thoughtful side A people. They're not, there could be side A people who are less thoughtful, but these people are actually trying to articulate their position, put it together, make it make sense. So I appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. There's been, I've listened to, I have not gotten to listen to all, but I have really appreciated what I have heard, especially of your earlier episodes, which is where I've done a lot of my listening. And the ability you've been able to take a topic and, actually get to the depth of it rather than, and kind of pull it apart, I think has been really, really helpful for a lot of people. And I mean, it's really been helpful for me.
We also tried to model that conversation is possible against people of pretty different positions. Even though, I mean, I'll say straight up, me personally, I think David Frank too, we have pretty strong positions. Like if you talk with me, if you ever talk to me, you'll find I'm extraordinarily skeptical of side A. I'm like, people, really? Obviously your view is desirable, but really, is that really how you get there? But we can still have conversations between people who actually we disagree on fairly important things. And I think people don't anticipate that in the polarized world we live in, right?
No.
So
and find things that are admirable, across that difference, and that you're still learning from them and being sharpened by them.
Yeah. And I admire them. Some of the side A, a few of them, I actually admire them as either better Christians than most like straight Christians I meet, I would say. And what do I do with that? Because it kind of makes my theological understanding of being in the church, being not in the church, like living a faithful life, it makes it more complex.
Yeah.
And And I'm happy to live in that tension, even though it's hard sometimes. So,
Yeah, and it's that power of when you can listen to someone, not just simply to respond, but actually to understand what has led them there.
yeah,
And
yeah.
like,
agreed.
oh yeah, this is like why you believe that, and that makes
Yeah.
sense. You know, doesn't mean
Yeah,
I
you can
agree,
totally
but
see.
like,
Yeah, you see how it follows. Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
yeah,
So
amazing. Ashley, you want to ask the next question? Whichever one you want to ask.
I was gonna ask, like, from where you guys started the podcast to where you guys now, do you feel like you guys have shifted any kind of like in your focus or your goals, and what may have like caused that along the way from where you were to where you are now? Because I mean, obviously, you had a name change, and everything, which could be significant or not. But in that, I feel like there was definitely things that may have like over time, maybe have shifted in the way you guys looked at what you wanted to do with the podcast.
I know one of our earlier goals, our first episode was talking about the pull to side A, and how for straight Christians, it's their desire to seek a good and beautiful life for their queer brethren.
Right. Yeah.
And
remember
so
that episode.
there was a part of us wanting to try to not just talk about what's true, but to show the good and beautiful possibilities for queer Christians in a side B life, and as a way for those who are kind of, deconstructing maybe their evangelical upbringings, of like help giving them some more vision to reconstruct that in different ways. And I don't know if we've been like in terms of just even like, oh, how many side B stories have we told? Some. There's always more work, I suppose, just to do to continue to say there's a good and beautiful life available, like wherever Jesus leads us, and so we can trust His leading even when it's tough. I think I'm continuing to think about the intersection of community and economics, and that does relate to like kinship and sexuality. So that's kind of just new, in that these things are not just like different topics, but they're intersecting more, which does relate to, I guess, our new name of new kinship, that these things are coalescing, and I'm maybe there's a slow fire burning in me to have a little bit more of a prophetic edge in the ways that these intersect. To becoming. So maybe in a 6 months or 12 months, I'll be able to answer that a little bit better, Ashley.
Hey, I have a few thoughts. First, I think I would talk a lot. I would have more side A conversations. David Frank at one point was like, "Meh, okay, tired of that." But for me, I would keep engaging, because for me, I think the real conversation is there.
Yeah.
David Frank convinced me sort of to incorporate side X, which we started of late. We've talked with side X people. Interesting. Like, they have very different beliefs from my own. But I also don't, me personally, I also don't think the conversation's there. Like, I think, I don't think their perspective has a lot to commend to it, in a way that I think side A still has stuff to commend. They could be commended towards as being a possible answer to these questions of being queer and being Christian. So that's been one shift. If I had ultimate power, I'd probably keep saying, let's talk with side A people. Like, that's what we should do. And that might happen again, but it just hasn't happened of late.
Yeah.
I also, personally, over time, I've started feeling more and more open. I think I was like Ashley, where I wanted more anonymity at the beginning. And I'm kind of moving towards more openness. I'm not totally open. I just have complex, like, family background and geographical conditions that I kind of exist in that make it hard to be like very open. But I'm moving towards that direction. I also, I hope that we engage more. We've done a lot of interviews of people, and I love that. But I also hope we start engaging more in, like, just more like a topical conversation. Like, let's construct in this episode some new understanding, and less about like let's talk about your life story, which of course those are not totally separate things. New understandings can come in the midst of stories, obviously, but yeah, just kind of different poles on this continuum of conversation. So I think I answered your question, Ashley. But those are some of the shifts that I've seen and that I kind of want to move towards. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So you mentioned if you could have all power in all of this. So one thing that I'm intrigued to that just brought up a question in my mind of like, obviously you're two individual human beings, which probably have different, like, diverse views in between yourselves. Have there been ways that your own diverse views have either like brought support or challenge to the podcast? I mean, you named one right there, but
yeah, there's one. I told David Frank we should have an episode on this particular question in the past.
Love it.
Yeah, because we're pretty similar in our theological like sensibilities, but we're different on certain. We have different personalities, I would say, and we also have some different areas of consideration. If you listen to us, we both care about kinship, like that's clear, but the kinship we care about is. I focus on something that's somewhat different than what he focuses on. He focuses a lot on intentional community stuff. My whole heart is given to these conversations around sober partnership, covenant brotherhood, covenant sisterhood, committed friendship, which are usually done in pairs.
Yeah.
Most often, not done in small communities.
Yeah.
Or small groups of people or whatever. So that's not a difference precisely, but a difference that we focus on.
It's been a refining thing for me. I mean, TJ's given me a lot of language around kinship, and I still laugh at him when he'll just like go up to a friend and be like, "So, I've been praying for your kinship vocation. How have you been thinking about it?" I'm like, TJ, people don't use these constructs and terms.
I love it. They get what I mean. They get what I mean eventually.
Eventually.
No, they look at you from Mars.
What was that, Ashley?
He said they get it eventually. I was like, yeah, eventually. At first they look at you like you're from Mars.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes CJ doesn't realize how much of a Martian he might be, but I enjoy it a lot. So it's been growing and shaping to understand why is TJ using these vocabulary? What's he thinking about? And even now to the ways that he's corrected me. Like we recently. Interviewed someone and they were talking about TJ's covenant brothers and his actual brothers. I was like, no, covenant brothers are actual brothers.
Yeah,
but they're not biological.
That surprised me.
And so that's something that I think I used to say, and now I'm like understanding, brotherhood more fully, and covenant brotherhood more fully. It took me a long time. Where was I going? But this tension. I mean, even just like. Interrelationally in our friendship of TJ being more focused on these specific kinship bonds and me wanting to bring together the whole community as it's actually like the Enneagram has been a helpful way to kind of explore that of like, I am the social subtype and TJ is the sexual subtype, the one-to-one subtype. And so just to like, because you always like you want to build the world around how you think and how you see things, and you want to put other people in those boxes, and just so it's continued both in just relationships and how we encourage each other, realize our hearts might actually be shaped a little bit differently in these ways, and forces me to hold back from imposing my values of just like how I want to build life and community. Upon other people, and make it kind of a cure-all.
Yeah,
and so I think that's, indirectly shapes then just how we're pursuing conversations and these ideas a little with more nuance of trying to pull out the different threads rather than just have like a dominating thread.
Yeah, and I was going to say if it should be clear from what I just said before this, in the previous question, but. David Frank has definitely been leaning towards like these side X and the side Y conversations, and me side A. And in the past it's been confusing why he cares. I know why he cares because his church is there, but I'm just like why waste time with those people? So which is horrible, but that's sometimes how I feel like those people and their conversations. It's just like. This is going to wear you down. Like that's not where the energy's at. I would assume, this is my current hypothesis, the next generation, side Y and side X won't be
Yeah.
prominent. That's
And
what
in
I
that
assume.
way,
And
I think you're completely right. Like in terms of what hits the next generation, but in part it's just because like I'm still in local community relationships with
Yeah,
these
that's the
people,
thing.
and they're in my denomination, they're in the churches that my church partners with or something, and so that's in part what compels me. But the one on the interesting thing with the side X folk, unlike side Y, where they're like, let's just not talk about this stuff and let's just condemn people theologically, at least the worst ones, we're still looking for good side Y people to interview.
Yeah.
You hear this and you're
So-
like, hey, I'm side Y, I'm not that. Then
Come talk to us.
Show up to us.
Side Y
We want
people
that.
don't call themselves side Y, so you're out of luck.
yeah, it's true. But if they're like, oh, that sensibility is my own.
Yeah.
Just come
Right.
and talk with us.
Yeah.
But anyways, Joshua, I'm so still eager for your last Revoice workshop to be published. Feel free to. I want to listen to it. Is because talking about the actual like sexual integrity in the context of holistic integrity, emotional, spiritual development, is something that tends to get focused on the most in side X communities, and so they quickly dismiss side B because they see them as just like pandering to like acceptance narratives, and not doing the deep work part of what all Christians are called to.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Did you hear that, Art Pareda? I hope you heard. I'm joking.
My goodness.
Love you, Art.
I think, like, in some of the stuff you guys are talking about, I think, like, what a lot of David Frank says is true, and what TJ says is true as well. Like, the next generation, side X isn't going to be prominent. But the problem, in a sense, is that the people leading the next generation, that's still going to be there. That's still going to be where a lot of them are drawing from.
And
That's going to be the source.
And yeah, you're right. They keep existing, and there's a geographical difference. Side X is still prominent in places outside of the U.S. Where I think in the U.S. it's more marginal. In the U.S., I think.
I'm going to play devil's advocate. First
Go
of
ahead.
all, before I do that, I want to clarify. I was calling Art out not because he was like side X, but because he should release the audio. I just reviewed it.
Just for those who didn't know, that's
Art Pineda works
I
for
understood
Revoice,
that.
and I was just making a little joke about like, release the audio. Anyway, wanted to clarify.
Got it.
Playing devil's advocate on this part,
ahead.
and
Go
not
ahead.
to get political, but I think that this election shows us that that there is a surprising swing conservative in Gen Z, which I have so many thoughts on. And I don't necessarily think it'll make them less gay affirming, obviously less trans affirming. Very much so. But I am intrigued what we're learning about Gen Z. I think Gen Alpha will be a completely different story. But I think this year we have really seen that there is an interesting shift, and I don't know if it's like related to like what Ashley was talking about, people who've led the generation, or like a opposite shift of we've heard this other narrative so long, now we're shifting in this direction.
Yeah.
So I'm just intrigued, but a little bit playing devil's advocate because that came to my mind in this conversation.
I think that's true. And I think like future casting is just a probabilistic endeavor. Like we can't quite know. And human beings, they go back and forth. There's like the movements that come, the movements that go.
Yeah.
So it's hard to know.
And I think part of the reason, like David was saying, like side X, they tend to do a lot of that kind of like that heart work, is because where side X originally started kind of was side B, and they were pushed into a certain narrative, whereas the way they began was this is how we are, how do we not do the things we're not supposed to do?
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
How do we live in this world like this, not according to how we feel? And that's, in a sense, very side B, but they're pushed into something else, and it became something else. But at the root of it, it was always, how do I work on myself? And I believe it just became distorted.
Yeah. We do have a similar lineage of kind of where we come from and some of the assumptions we make. That
100%.
seems true. Yeah.
Where do you guys think that the side B movement is going? Like, how do you see, maybe in a sense, how it's changed since you came into side B to now,
Mm-hmm.
and where do you guys think it needs to go in the future as to maybe continuing where you see it going, or where you think it may need to adjust course in some things?
Well, I thought we were just going to have the pleasure of asking you guys the tough
Oh, no.
questions.
No.
Okay, TJ, you go first.
I also want to echo the diversity of voices point that Josh made in the other episode of this other part of this episode. I think that's totally true. I think that's only for the good. And I keep meeting new people. I'm like, wow, you are like a bright star in our field of side B, and we're so happy that you're kind of coming on. And I'm glad that new voices are coming. I mean, I'm an ultimate partisan in this respect, but I totally think we need to figure out covenants, celibate partnerships, covenant brotherhood and sisterhood, like that. That's what I care about too. I'm a man on a mission to get that figured out in sort of a more general way. But yeah, I think we need to figure that out. I think that's for the flourishing of side B people, but also for the flourishing of the church, because FYI, straight people also participate in these sorts of relationships, even if you don't know them.
Yeah.
Historically, they have. So I think we need to get that organized, and that also requires theological work and like convincing the church in some ways, because ideally, in my perspective, they'd be formalized through church vows like it was in the past. But most churches, I think, won't touch it in the U.S. They won't touch it in through the priest or the pastor, whoever, blessing covenants.
No.
So yeah, that's extremely problematic in my view, and I'm hoping that will change. I'm also I really hope that I think minority communities can keep engaging more. Because it's pretty small, as we talked about in the other episode. Side B is still pretty like European American evangelical focused, and there's strengths to that, there's weaknesses to that, and I'm hoping more and more people can engage. One thing I appreciated Revoice is they started engaging the people who still use SSA as a terminology, like intentionally. They say Revoice is in their materials, whatever they say, LGBTQ plus, and then SSA, because a lot of ethnic minority communities who are English speaking in the U.S. still use SSA language for a bunch of reasons. So yeah, this is me. I think we have to figure out our side A apologetics better. Again, I'm skeptical of side A. So, but I think we have to figure out what sort of theological responses can we have, because right now I think it's our response is not that clear, and the responses are mostly written by straight people that exist right now as sort of apologetics towards side A people. There's actually side A queer people who write apologetics for themselves. Yeah. But there's less of that among the side B side B people who write a queer apologetics for us, or side B. So I think we need to do that. And we were just talking to another guest on a different episode. Probably will come out after this. But he was talking about building bridges between some types of side A people and side B. And I don't know how I feel about that exactly. And I know probably even in this room right here, there's different opinions on that. But I kind of think we need to figure this out and have some more unified understanding of how to engage side A, even though no movement has like totally united perspectives on anything. Yeah. So it will always be some variance, and that's fine. But I just wish we would move forward on that. And again, because I think side A is like the real conversation.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Like, because I agree with you. We need more like apologetic, books from a side B perspective, because they really all come more from a side X perspective. And I think it's hard because we've not known how to do it because of the solidarity sometimes between side A and side B Christians. I think there's been a situation where we've been fearful to do it because it sounds like we're going to be like side A people are trash. And not knowing how to do it in that way. And I believe this could be a whole conversation in itself. And I put it in like our 4 sides document. I don't believe side A is one side anymore.
Yeah,
I don't believe.
We also distinguish it. We distinguish different sides in side A ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do y'all call it? Because I don't have names for it.
Right now,
references.
the current thing that we're playing with is side A and side AA. And how we distinguish is side A are the people like Matthew Vines who still think marriage is between 2 people and it's monogamous and committed and lifelong.
Right.
And then we say side double A for people who don't necessarily hold that. They don't necessarily oppose like polyamory or polygamy or polyandry. And they don't necessarily oppose what is called fornication, like extramarital sex or sex before
Right.
marriage.
Yeah.
So that's how we distinguish them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, David.
Someone's like, double A almost sounds like a good thing. Maybe it should be like side alpha. They're returning to the old Greek ways.
Oh Lord.
Maybe.
That's
That's how we distinguish them. So.
I know that Matthew Vine has distinguished them himself as affirming theology being his kind of perspective and queer theology being a bit more of the Q Christian fellowship, which I have
Right,
used.
he does.
Which
Yeah, he does.
I could see.
I
that.
kind
told
of
me
played
that one
around
time.
with side A versus side A and side Q because of that. Because I try to be like, what do the people themselves call themselves? But I don't know.
There's something good about that. He demanded
Yeah.
that. He argued with me about this once, and he said, "Yes, side Q," and I said, "Okay, whatever."
But
But-
I'm like, but David Bennett's like reclaiming queer for the glory of God. And actually, if that's my response to your question, Ashley,
Yes,
is
please, go
like
ahead.
I want to see queers for the radical transformation of this world for the kingdom of God. And that's like what I feel like the side B movement needs to become, is not just the age old of like, we're just trying to get power, we're just trying to be comfortable, we're just trying to feel safe. It's like, we do need to find safe community. We do need to experience the comfort of God. And then let's take up our crosses and call it, like follow Jesus into the broken places, into the places where things do need to be upturned, where things need to be queered and tilted over and rethought through and deconstructed and reconstructed. And that goes way beyond just merely our like sexual ethics and what words we're allowed to use. And I feel like the experience of being side B queer like gives us this opportunity to say, what is Jesus really calling us to? And how am I not just going to fit into the mold of what the world is telling me to do? And I want side B people to see their experience of being queer as like a holy calling. This is where I like side A people just like, it grieves me. I don't get like frustrated just like because of bad words, but I feel like they're missing out on their calling of this, like to overturn the idols of romance and the like contortions of marriage that our culture holds on to, and to like see what God has given you in this queer experience and what goodness is going to come that not just you need, that's not just going to be good for you personally, but it's actually going to be a blessing to your communities. Like they need you to do this work. They need you to have that prophetic witness. And I think we can do, I'm so grateful that like side B, we're getting those more and more elders in our communities. It's not just like we're all young and figuring this out because we have like very few examples, but we also, let's not settle for just having a good, nice side B community. Like, let's keep overturning things
And reconstructing. It's both
Yeah.
the dynamics. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Renovating them. That's beautiful. And we can't wait to see where you all take this. And I think, like we said at the beginning of this episode and stuff, a lot of this was us wanting to just really, in some ways, pass the baton in some ways, I guess you could kind of say. And we really believe that this is, yeah, please do. And so thankful for the work you guys are doing and the ways that you are engaging in these conversations in ways we never would at Life on Side B. And so thankful for that, because it's your guys' voices and the ways you're bringing it in and the ways that's going to lead forward. So it's gorgeous and kingdom work that you are doing.
Man. And we're thankful to have a foundation that you guys charted.
Thanks
the
for
path
letting us
before.
stand on your shoulders.
So we appreciate that as well.
Love it. Amazing. Yeah. Thank you for trusting us with this this thing. And again, sorry, Art, for my ambiguous call out. But but we've really appreciated this time with you guys. Ashley, any last words? Anything there?
Yeah, like I am, like Josh said when Life on Side B started, and like he said he went to QCF. He's like, "Do you guys have any like Side B podcasts?" It was like, 1, no, because no one's offered. 2, no, because there weren't any.
Yeah.
You know, there was, like he said, there was a little bit of your other brothers, and then, you know, some of Lori Creeks, that they didn't have a lot of resources at that point that were from us. And so I'm glad that even though, like you said, like even though it's like, all right, you know, our time come to an end or whatever, but there's still so many other things for people that are still there that they can still find. We weren't the only ones that were there. Like, we were able to be like, people were like, oh, we can do that. We can. So I'm happy that there's still something going to be there for people to continue listening to continue to engage with.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure people still listen to our old episodes, but to have something that's continually engaging with the culture and with what's going on, I think it's going to be really good.
As a question, are there any other Side B podcasts that you have been listening to of late? Because I know
I haven't been listening to nobody as of late. To be honest.
too busy.
She's starting a business.
Starting a business and caring for a
And have a
toddler.
full-time job.
Oh,
And have a full-time job.
Craziness.
Okay. Yeah, too
There
much.
was that one Brazilian Side B podcast, but I don't know if it's still around.
Oh, okay.
No, and I followed them more when I was on Twitter, but I have
Yeah.
since abandoned Twitter.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
And my prayers
I
that
saw,
maybe we can come together and do at least a Spanish episode at some point. Por
Yeah.
favor,
look,
por
me and
favor.
Josh
Claro.
tried. Me and
Agreed,
Josh
agreed.
tried. We did like
You
We
tried?
did.
What does that mean? You tried?
We did 2.
it's hard to find people.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
I mean, I guess
mean-
you and I could talk, but let's do one.
I know some
yeah.
people. I know some Mexicans.
Vamos.
Bring it on.
Claro.
yeah.
Yeah. Any last words from you guys? I mean, you guys will have so many more last words on this, but
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, thanks again for the foundation you built. We're happy to be walking down the path that you started to chart out. And we hope that you guys can keep engaging us in the podcasting format in some respect. We'll be happy to see you again at Revoice or other times of connection. So
yeah, for sure. And you guys are just now never allowed to stop doing podcasting. There you go.
I know.
Done. Yep.
Done.
Thank you, listeners, for this time. If you didn't already, go over to the other side and listen to the other part. But we look forward to what this podcast will become. All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.